listening to Make It, a podcast by Bonsai Creative that helps aspiring professionals in film get where they're going faster by dissecting the advice, knowledge, and insights of professional creatives in the film industry. I'm your host, Chris Barkley.
Hi, I'm Valerie Barnhart, and I am an independent filmmaker, director, and animator. I made an award-winning film called Girl in the Hallway. It's a short docu-horror true crime. It was qualified for the Oscars in both the short animation and short documentary categories. And I'm right now working on an animated comedy through the National Film Board of Canada, and that's what's occupying my time as of late.
Valerie Barnhart, welcome to the Make It podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It is our pleasure, and I will give this audience a little bit more on you. I'm going to read a small bit from your bio, and you can always tell me if something's changed or if that's incorrect, because that is the nature of the internet, of course. It says, Valerie Barnhart is an independent animator and visual artist based out of Ottawa, Canada. Her interdisciplinary practice is exploratory in nature, but revolves specifically around the dynamics of silence and inaction as a form of violence. Valerie earned her BFA from Emily Carr Institute of Art and Design as a visual arts major with a studio specialty in printmaking, drawing, and academic emphasis on decolonization politics and non-Western art. Her art practice made a massive shift into documentary and animation entirely by accident, which we'll get into in this conversation. Valerie taught herself how to animate during this production. Valerie has exhibited in Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary. She lives with her husband and a motley crew of animals amongst piles of dusty books. So let's start right there with that, which is, what's your favorite book? And could you provide any recommendations?
Oh my God, books. Oh, don't even get me started. That's the most difficult thing to ask me. I read voraciously. I'm one of those people that read like 3 books at once.
Wow.
My favorite book. Oh gosh. I'm going to have to say right now, at this very second, the answer will change tomorrow, but right now, this very second, at 11:13 in the morning, I will say The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. And I love it because it's YA, which is really cool. They get to tackle really interesting topics you don't see in adult fiction. And it's the story is told by Death. And Death is telling you about the most interesting person Death has come across in the existence of death in life. And it's a 12-year-old girl in Nazi Germany who steals books.
Oh, wow. Okay, so spell the author's last name for me and for us.
Zusak. Z-U-S-K-S. Oh, let me just Google this. This is going to bother me if I say this wrong. They made a really bad movie. Don't watch the movie. Just read the book, okay?
Okay.
Okay, Marcus, The Book Thief. Let me just get the right spelling here. Google.
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah, so it's Z-U-S-A-K. It's won a lot of awards. Got it. Yeah. So right. That's my official answer right now.
I love it. Okay. So I'm like you. I do have a stack of books all around me at all times. I am in the middle of so many. I think the last 2 books I started was one I've been, you ever have like a movie or a book that's like on your mind for decades and you just never come around to reading it? Yeah. That's like The Road for me. I've never read The Road. So many things have been said about The Road. So I am now reading The Road and by Cormac McCarthy. And I also just bought The 4 Agreements, which is a wisdom book by Don Miguel Ruiz, and a book on wisdom. And it's like there's actually 2 or 3 other books I'm reading but I'm not going to mention them here. So I am just like you. I totally get that. And I am into that. As we mentioned in your bio, you went to the Emily Carr Institute of Art and Design and even spent some time at Willem de Kooning Academy. But you did not go to school to learn how to animate.
No, I
and, which is amazing to me. How does one decide just to wake up one day and be an animator?
It had to do with the story. I'm a huge fan of poetry. And so I was on YouTube going down a rabbit hole, watching like beat poets do their thing on YouTube. And I came across this poet from the San Francisco area named Jamie DeWolf. And he performed this spoken word thing, which is my film, like this confession that was just like astounding. And I listened to it 3 times in a row and I was like, this has to be a movie. This has to be a movie. No one's going to make this a movie unless I make it a movie. And at that point I was just like, I have never made a movie before, but I don't care. I'm going to make a movie. It can't be that hard, can it? Haha. I'll just animate it. Like, that's not hard. That'll take me 3 months. And then 3 years later, I have a movie. So yeah, that's my famous last word. So it was really, I was called to tell a story and I had to tell it. And I had to do anything I had to do to tell that story. And that's how that came along with animation.
Yeah. And we'll get into that a lot during this conversation because I'm just dumbfounded. I am absolutely floored by you and your talent. And by the end, we'll share some links to your website because even your art on paper is absolutely stunning. You have an art piece called or named Through that can stand up against any piece of art I've seen. And you have some photos too. I love your photo Winter. So I encourage this audience to go to your website, which we'll share, and look at the photo Winter. It's so ominous. And then Missing Art, which is hilarious and belongs on someone's wall as well. Jamie DeWolf, by the way, a very deep person, lots of poetry, has done several things for Snap Judgment, which has been around since 2010. He kind of he looks like Morgan Spurlock a little bit, the guy who did Super Size Me, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So he kind of
that's a really good analogy. That's a really good analogy. Yeah.
And so he kind of puts you back on your heels when he gets so deep and emotional and hits you with the poetry and the storytelling. So really, really love that for sure. So you talk about the story turned you into an animator. So let's get into that a little bit. Girl in the Hallway is the short we're talking about. And it's such a powerful story. You go down a rabbit hole on YouTube, I'm assuming, going through poetry, and you find this poem and this story by Jamie DeWolf, which is a true story about the murder of Ziana Fairchild, a 7-year-old child that was murdered by a serial killer in California. It's absolutely heartbreaking, gut-wrenching to hear the story and to watch her animation, which is so brilliant. How did you connect with Jamie to get the approval to make this film?
Honestly, it's social skills and stalker skills. You know, I went on the internet. I stalked him a bit, found his email on his website, emailed him, and just very nicely asked him if he would let me make an animation out of his story. And he thought I was just making like a silly little fan video. So he was like, yeah, sure, whatever, you know, and like, yeah. And then I did this. So it was, he was really on board, like right from the get-go. Like he was all about it.
That's amazing. So what has been his feedback once he realized this isn't a little, because it took 3 years to make this. I'm sure he forgot he told you it was okay. And then now it's winning awards. It was in the Vimeo staff pick. It was an Atlantic magazine choice. Like you said, it was nominated for an Oscar or was in the line to be nominated for Oscar. So what is he saying now? Contemporary.
I don't talk very much to Jamie. We didn't really have contact during the creation of the project. Jamie doesn't see, that's the thing, like it's dirty laundry, right? So like it was very emotional for him to experience this story because like it's an adaptation of his performance, right? So it's scary to have somebody else take his story and give it, like, put it through a filter and interpret it, and then have that on a big screen in front of an audience for entertainment purposes. Like at the world premiere, he was very emotional, and I felt like what was probably the best bet was to give him space during that, because he was just very upset. It's a very upsetting thing for him. So it's not something he watches on a regular or anything like that. Absolutely not. He's happy that it's gotten so much play and that it's gotten awards and so much attention. And he's glad like the story's gone out there and more out in the public, but it's still very difficult for him.
Yeah. And
he's incredibly.
And one of the big themes of this story is this idea of, silence is violence. And I think this is kind of part of your background, at least from college as well. And you're hearing this phrase, silence is violence, a lot, because in this film, just the times we're living in, right? So Black Lives Matter, different types of protests. Absolutely. But in this film, the thing that you're describing, the thing that Jamie feels so guilty about, Jamie DeWolf, is that he sat by and watched this girl be alone every day and actually gave entrance to her killer over and over and over again, but closed the door on the little girl because it wasn't his business. So have you had to adjust your behavior, and how do you recommend people adjust to the fear of overreacting, the fear of invading someone else's privacy?
See, that's a tricky thing. It's not so black and white, right? Because we all want to be that hero that runs into that burning building and like saves those lives, right? But it's a matter of like what keeps you quiet and what keeps you from stepping in, and looking to that strength in yourself, right? Like there's a lot of reasons why a man would not invite a child into his apartment. Just assumptions people would go, like just from that alone, But I think you're going to have to use your heart and your guidance on that. Like for the specific circumstances, like, is it dangerous for you to step in? First off, is it safe for you to step in? Is it really, like, it's tricky, right? It depends on the circumstances and depends on the person. And I think your upbringing and your common sense is going to be the best indicator on whether or not you should act or it's safe to act.
Right. And the thing that the film touches on a little bit is that common sense muscle doesn't get worked a lot in everyday life. And so it can completely be out of shape at the very moment you need it. I know that for me, the effect that, and I know your audiences have had varying reactions to this film, tears and a lot of emotions. I know that when I watched it, the immediate thing I thought to myself was, I wouldn't have been that. I'm a person that helps people. I would have definitely helped her. But then I'm reminded of all my white friends that said they would have been abolitionists back in the slavery days. Every one of my white friends would have been John Brown, and it's just not true. Some of them would have been slave owners because that would have been common to do that at the time. And so it's a really tough thing. You're right. Like to grapple with, like, are you going to be the hero at the moment you need to be the hero? And are you going to even know to be a hero? And is it going to be appropriate, right? Are you going to accidentally ruin your own life trying to protect someone else's erroneously? Yeah,
exactly. And it's complicated. It's very complicated, especially when you're talking about systemic issues, right? Because like this was a poor neighborhood. Everybody in that apartment building, all the neighbors had their own problems, with poverty or addictions or whatever, and so that's the thing. But I don't know, like I live in a really bad area in my city. And, I have a lot of pride for my neighborhood. And even though everyone likes to shit on it, like at the same time, like I like the fact that like my neighbors know each other and we keep an eye on each other. We know which cat belongs to which house or whose kids belong to which house. You know what I mean? Like it's more of a neighborhood. And so I always wonder about that in my own neighborhood. Like, do people step in when they see someone in trouble? And I'll have to say, honestly, yes, in my neighborhood that happens. So I don't know about the dynamic in his building with his neighbors,
Yeah.
I'm losing my God, sorry.
No, it's true because it's not a function of income or socioeconomic status. It's a matter of trust. If you don't trust your neighbor to the left and the right, then you're not going to keep up with them. In my neighborhood, it's not a poor neighborhood, but it's not bad. But I have such a close relationship with every person on my street. I know every person on my street, and it makes the entire neighborhood safer for everyone. It's an extremely sort of libertarian concept, but I think it really works, and it's honest and it works out. So thank you for that. By the way, I don't know if this problem will take care of itself in the future with big data as well, because everyone has a Ring now or some sort of camera on their front stoop. And someone's collecting that and aggregating that into a picture. We have facial recognition for better or worse. And this idea of big data in the future, it seems like the issue will become, do I have the right to be tracked, right? Like, oh, I'm in a poor neighborhood. I can't afford to get these technologies. Therefore, no one saw my killer, or no one can predict through big data that this person's going to be a criminal, which I think is less than 10 years away, personally. Mm-hmm. So it's a fascinating idea, Valerie, once we go down the rabbit hole a little bit of like what's possible. Because on one hand, I don't like it. Like I saw a Black man be accused of a murder he didn't do through facial recognition. I read an article on that last week.
Oh yeah, there's inherent biases for sure in the facial acquisition software. They're already showing biases with like all sorts of applications for that, which is really disturbing when you think about it.
Exactly, but it's all sort of in the realm of good intention. Like our intention is to find people like the guy in your movie that killed the little girl before he kills, kind of thing. Or the idea is to understand how they move. What'd you say?
Yeah, he was a white guy.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. He
was a white guy. He wasn't a person of color, so even the facial recognition software wouldn't have found that. I think when it comes to sociopathy and criminality, right? Like criminality is a social construct. Like what is a crime is defined by the society that the crime exists in, and when it comes to sociopathy, that's a percent. That's a mental illness. That's a percent of the population. It's just going to be guaranteed. You're going to be born that way. Whether or not sociopathy goes to the extreme outlier of serial killer, right? That's an extreme outlier. Most sociopaths are lawyers and really good politicians, but like bad sociopaths are like serial killers, and nothing like the facial recognition software wouldn't stop Curtis Dean Anderson. Like he's banking, these serial killers bank on the fact they're probably not going to get caught, and that's why they do the crime, is they think they're so smart and clever that they'll be able to outsmart the police. And there's nothing you can do to prevent sociopathy. So it's kind of like when you take a sociopath and you horribly abuse them, you put them in these social factors, you create a serial killer. Well, like you're not going to stop abuse. You're not going to stop these certain precursors that create someone like with that kind of criminality. And I think it's really hard when it comes to things like serial killers. Like, can we prevent that type of crime? I don't think we can.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think there are people that are smarter than me that think they can. And I would tend to agree with you. And just to be clear for the audience, Curtis Dean Anderson was the serial killer that killed Ziana Fairchild along with 11 or 12 other children. If you care to look him up for any reason.
Yeah, the FBI is still looking for people to identify as victims. So the link is on my website for that if you want to be a true crime sleuth and read the reports for the FBI call for help. Yeah, that's all on my website.
Absolutely. We have a big audience in California, so there will be people that do that, I'm sure. You used animation to tell the story, even though you didn't have this skill set. So why did how did you decide, oh, I'm going to animate this? That's how I'm going to tell the story. And what was that process like? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, animation is such a liberating choice as a documentarian. It really is, because your story is located in reality, but your imagery doesn't have to be. And that was the best way to approach this story, because I'm dealing with poetry. So it's not an oddly literal account of a crime and a confession and a witness testimony. It's told in a poetic way. And I felt I'm not be limited by reality. I could create a psychological space in animation, and it would be a far more interesting film visually than like what I have with my budget constraints. Like, do-it-yourself animation is really cheap. Not when you do it properly with like a pipeline and all the roles. But if you do everything by yourself, it is super, super cheap. And so when I look at my budget constraints, animation made the most sense. I was able to make something pretty with no money, next to no money, versus I would have a very small budget. Then I have to go fly out to Vallejo, California, and I have to go get all this B-roll, and I have to find all these people and get them on camera, and I have to get Jamie performing. Like it wouldn't have been as powerful a movie, I think, if I went into live action. Animation is what was the best decision as a director.
Yeah, you quoted as saying you aren't really limited by your budget. You're limited by your artistry.
That's my thing. Yes.
Yeah. Let your limitations be part of the creative process. What does that mean? Talk about that a little bit. Your budget, this whole thing cost you $1,000.
Yeah. 1,000 Canadian. Yeah. With what I mean by that is just simple. Is like, if you're really truly a genius artist, like if you're really like this beautiful artist that can tell beautiful stories and tell beautiful imagery, you would be able to do that with any tool you grab. So like there's these YouTube videos I love watching where there's like these, great musicians are playing on little kids' drum sets, and they'll do this crazy metal thing on this like, Barbie drum set. And, and like, yeah, they're limited. It's not like the best drum set you can buy if you're going to be a percussionist, but like they're still able to like be a beast on there, Mm-hmm. And I felt the same way with like my film. It's just like, all right, I don't have the background in animation school. I didn't go to film school. I don't have any of that schooling behind me, but I have the schooling of the masters behind me in visual arts, and I'm visually literate. And I possess the same degree as everybody who went to film school and animation school did. And at this point, it's just technique to make things move. I can go read textbooks. That's fine. I can go on Instagram. I could go on Tumblr. I could go talk to animators. I could go to film festivals and meet people. But ultimately, what do I have around me? And then I use that to define the aesthetic. So if I tried to make this like Hollywood movie on $1,000 budget, it's going to fall flat on its face. It's going to look stupid. Like if I'm true to my materials, then you're able to, and you work within the constraints of those materials, you can create something really beautiful. If you're truly talented, you can.
I think you touch on something really important there, which is this honesty you have to have with yourself about what is the level of your current talent. What is the level of your creativity? You can be whoever you want to be. And I learned this, I'm going to date myself here, Valerie, but I learned this on MySpace, which was my first sort of interaction with social media in my life, which was that I had a really close friend who in real life was a deadbeat dad and had no job, but on MySpace earned $75,000 a year and was a loving father. And and it just occurred to me, which doesn't sound like much of a phenomenon saying it now, but back then in 2006 and 2007, it was like, whoa, wait a second. You can create an avatar of yourself that is yourself. You can be whoever you want. So I think that we could tell ourselves whatever we want online, But when it comes down to it, are we able to create something beautiful with the resources that we have? And that's a look in the mirror moment, right?
Exactly. And I have a degree in drawing. So like to go into animation, that's not a stretch at all. So a lot of people are like, oh my God, that's so amazing. No. It's a technique. Animation is so straightforward when you break it down to the nuts and bolts. It's not as complex as people think it is.
Yeah, we're definitely going to
be less impressed.
I don't think we're going to do that. I think people are going to watch this and end up being very impressed that you taught yourself how to animate and then turn that into an award-winning film. But we are going to dig into that a little bit later, because I do want people to have the resources. We talked about this a few times, that this process from discovery of the work by Jamie DeWolf to finishing this film and submitting it to festivals took you 3 years. One of the things that happens with first-time filmmakers is needing that support group around them, needing the confidence, needing the motivation. So how did you have the patience for this? How did you keep going? Were there any doubters around you, any haters, anybody that kept saying, oh, you're still working on that?
Oh my God, yes. Totally. Like I didn't go to animation school, like when I had the choice to choose my major in art school, because everyone told me I wasn't a good enough artist and I'd be a joke and a laugh and no one would be interested in my stories. I listened to that for decades. No one would be interested in anything I'd have to say. And then it took me in my 30s to be like, screw that. I'm going to tell a story. I don't really care. And I'm not going to wait for a funding body or a producer or somebody to say it's okay for me to make a story, tell a story. No, I have a story to tell. I don't really care what you have to say. I'm going to tell it. And that was my step moving forward. And I'm sorry, what was your question?
No, it's totally fine. I'll rephrase it, because it was kind of a long question and contextualized heavily. But we understand filmmakers are artists, and there's the fragility there, especially if you haven't done this before. You don't have the confidence that you're able to pull this off. I mean, you're taking 3 years to do this. How did you push back against people that doubted you could pull this off when it took 3 years, maybe even including Jamie DeWolf? And then who supported you through this process, help you get through, and how, talk about that process and what that meant to you.
Okay. I really had to look at myself. The support didn't come at the beginning. Everyone thought I was stupid and I'm going to make a fool of myself. Support came when I was about halfway through, and I'd start showing 10-second clips to my family and friends. Like, hey, check this out. Hey, check this out. And then people be like, wow, that's crazy. And then at the halfway mark is when I started getting support from friends and family.
Interesting.
Because my worst critic is my mom. Actually, it's not me. So yeah, I come from a pretty harsh family. When it comes to like support, I got that from the film community in the animation world. Like in my city, in Ottawa, the Ottawa International Animation Film Festival. It's the second largest film festival for animation-focused films in the world after Annecy in France. Mm-hmm. It's the largest in North America. It's an Oscar qualifier. It's this huge festival. It's honestly one of my favorite festivals on the circuit, just after traveling like in 2019 to all these festivals. It's an amazing festival. And I would go there every year. And I would, pay for the industry pass. I would cry as my credit card burst into flames, but I would go anyway. And I would treat that as my film school. So I would go watch all the movies I could. I would go to every party I could. I would talk to anybody who would talk to me, producers, studio. I would go straight up to studio execs and just be like, hey, I'm teaching myself how to animate. Do you want to look at my stuff? La, la, la. Let's talk. Give me advice. Like, I didn't care, because the thing is, these important people don't remember you. So I don't know how many times Chris Robinson, who's the artistic director of Ottawa International Animation Festival, I was introduced to him 5 times. The first 4 times I made a really bad impression and he made fun of me and was really dismissive. The 5th time he bought me a beer.
There you go.
It was great. And he had no memory of the other 4 times we've met over the years. Like, these people will not remember you. So it's okay. You could be awkward as ever with your business cards. Just like, hey, I'm making a movie. You're making a movie. That's cool. Do you have any advice for someone like me? And and just using social skills. And eventually, you start making friends, and those are the friends I would email in the middle of the night going, I have a technical issue, or I need some advice. But when it comes to that, so it was really just the film community. And Disney actually has this really unspoken policy of mentorship. So if you go and approach any one of their employees, and they have to have active social media as part of their job requirements, you can go DM them a question and they have to answer you.
Oh, wow. That's a huge value to this audience. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So just to go on Instagram, find the directors, find the artists, find whoever in whatever genre, like whatever aspect of filmmaking you're into, find people you're totally fans of that are not super famous. Like, like Quentin Tarantino is not going to answer my DMs, but like, someone that's not super famous, but just regular Joe, and like message them in the DMs. They're more flattered you're asking, and they're more than happy to like bend over backwards and give you the answers.
I love that. And by the way, you'd be very hard to forget. You have blue hair. So, and today I think you had pink hair. Is that right? So the fact that this guy didn't remember you after 4 times is not your fault. I'll put it that way.
No, it's not. So I tell everybody, just go to the festivals, network like as ever. They're totally worth the cost of the pass. And then just talk and make friends. Just do as much as you can to make friends. They're going to do everything to see you succeed because they're your friend.
I love that. You talked about animation not being like the most difficult thing once you know how to draw. You used charcoal, pastel, graphite. You used a powdered graphite. Am I pronouncing this right? It's called Conte. Is that how you pronounce it?
Conte. Yeah. Conte.
And so these were the mediums to bring your story to life. Why did you choose this type of animation and those materials?
Because I have my budget, remember? So the money I spent for my $1,000 had to do with buying Photoshop and Dragon Frame. So I didn't steal the software. So that I was honest about.
Good.
When it came to charcoal, in art school, we had to buy these drawing kits for drawing class, where it's just like all the art supplies you need for a drawing class. And it came with like a box of charcoal in them. And I never used that much charcoal. And so I have an obscene amount of charcoal in it, still an obscene amount of charcoal. And I went and it's like, okay, I want to go use up this paper I have that is just lying around, this black paper. I used 1 pad of black paper. That's it. 26 pieces of paper in this entire animation. Wow. So I had this 1 pad of paper. I had a lot of charcoal. So I'm like, okay, this is what I'm using. This is like what I happen to have. And then I still have charcoal left over. I animated a 10-minute film using charcoal, and I still have charcoal. So I'm never going to get used to it. I'm never going to use it all up.
But when you're the director and the animator of a film, that kind of makes you the editor by default, I'm assuming, as well. When you're drawing this and when you're animating this stuff, does that mean you're directing as you animate, or do you just draw a bunch of stuff and then have to edit and then use your camera to direct it separately? How does that work?
Well, with this technique, it's really only one person can do it. So there's less of that having to direct other people. There wasn't really that much of a skill set there. It was just sort of what my thoughts were. Editing and animation happens before you animate. So it's in the beginning, it's in pre-production. So I would use like Post-it notes. That was old school classic, right? With Post-it notes. And I would do these like stick figure scribbles about what this is going to look like. And then I would listen to the phrasing. I would break everything down to like 10, 15 second phrasings. And then I would meditate for like a week on like the perfect way to show that. And then I wouldn't be able to do that. And I had no skill set and I had no idea how, and I didn't have the budget. So then I'm like, okay, how do I take that and like make it easier? and then like try to like simplify. And simplifying was so hard. That was really, really difficult. And then I just experimented, like, how do I do this? And then I would just read books or like watch movies. And then I would try to pick apart technique and then just experiment. And then it would not turn out like my first take. I rarely ever kept my first take. First take sucked. So I'll be like, all right, time to redo. And then I would destroy everything. And because in stop motion, it's really unforgiving. The reason why you don't see a lot of stop motion is because you can't go in and edit like in 2D or 3D animation where you can go like, oh, that frame's not working. I'm just going to go in and fix that frame. Like you can't do that in stop motion. So in stop motion, you go from frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on. So if there's a problem with frame 2, you have to delete every frame up to frame 2 to fix frame 2.
Oh, wow. Ooh.
So I always had to make that decision after I finished that 10, 15 seconds. Is this the best I can do? If the answer was no, then I destroyed it and did it again.
Holy moly.
And I would destroy it and do it again till it looked the best I can possibly do. And I had to be very honest with myself. This is where my art school training was really important, with like being like really critical. And is this working? Is the composition good? Like, is the movement okay? Like, is that one frame over there too problematic? Do I leave it? You know, like I'd have those questions for myself, and then I would just do it over and over and over again till I got something good. And then I would move on to the next thing.
I love this thing you said about how hard it is to simplify. And it's a narrative I've spoke about since I got out of college. So I guess I'd be, or maybe even before, maybe 2007, 2008. And it's this idea of half and half. It's one of the best exercises I ever had. And I'm a journalism major. And we would have to take an article that had already been written and cut it in half. And that was extremely difficult. Like to take out a professional writer's, or someone who got paid to write, let's at least put it that way, to take their work and then try to cut it in half without losing meaning. And then this is where it got devilish. The professor would turn around and say, now cut it in half again. And so this process of half and half and having to do that for a couple of semesters taught me the power of simplicity, where you know it's the right idea when you can sum it way, way down and not lose any meaning. Sometimes you can't do it at all. Sometimes it just can't happen. You cannot go half and half without losing meaning, but you do get a chiseled away piece of diamond from all the rock and muck that might have been around it as a writer. And I feel the same way about sculpting. I feel the same way about art, film, and messaging without noise. And I think what you accomplished in The Girl in the Hallway is that you had animation that played out just like you said, with that simplicity where there isn't a lot of noise between what you're trying to animate and what Jamie DeWolf is trying to elucidate in his speech. So it's really brilliant work. And I know it was not easy to simplify. So I wanted to make that a touchstone of your point there.
Oh yeah. Simplification is so sophisticated. It's just what, if I had the budget to make this movie, it wouldn't look this good. Like, honestly, like if the fact that I didn't have a budget and I had these creative constraints is what made this movie good, in my opinion. Wow. Like if I had everything I wanted, like it wouldn't be this way, I think. And I think the struggle was what made me a better filmmaker, for sure.
I love that.
And I look at like, yeah. And I look at like these creative restraints, or just how you become more creative. Like it's that saying where like necessity is the mother of all invention. Like for some of my transitions, so that's where I spent all my time, is the transitions, not the actual like show stopping scenes. Those were really quick. It was the transitions between each scene. And I would sit there and do all these transitions, and I invented new technique for an animation. I didn't know that till I talked to an animation professor. I would do these moving mechanics out of origami, because like all I had was newspapers for free out of the recycling bin in the mail room of my apartment building. So like I was literally using garbage and just like, tra, like let's let's make this. And I think just a lot of people get held up on their budget or not having the flashiest camera or like the equipment, or they just get so hung up on budget or having all these milestones for like the perfect movie. But Martin Scorsese doesn't get the budget he wants. So if he's not getting the budget he wants, I'm not getting my budget. So tell your story.
I think it's such great advice and just a wonderful point. And if anyone wants to see what you did with some of these random pieces, garbage, etc., and how you turned them into art, your Twitter feed, Instagram, Tumblr feed, which we can share all those things at the end, is a great place to start. You're quoted as saying, storytelling is medicine. What is the illness? And talk to us about what you mean by that.
That's a really personal question. Storytelling is medicine. Culturally, I'm not white. So even though I'm white, culturally, I was adopted into the Mohawk Nation by my dad when I was 4 years old. And so even though I'm a white person, I've lived in Indigenous communities and within the Indigenous community and been raised by my dad. And it's an oral tradition, it's an oral culture where people tell stories, and the storytelling is medicine. So you would go to an elder and you would offer them a gift, and they would tell you story and that wisdom and that history. And that has immense power and importance, having these stories. And so when I look at important stories, like they have to serve people, because like your role as a storyteller is to act like a shaman, where you go off alone and you experience these things in the world, and you distill it into a story and you bring it back to people who would never experience these things, and they can gain the wisdom and medicine and learn from it as well. And I think a story like what Jamie is telling with his witness testimony, where he's coming forward on a murder and missing Indigenous women and girls, two-spirited crime, which he wasn't even aware of, because in the United States, MMIW is not really in the forefront of a conversation, unfortunately. But in Canada, the Truth and Reconciliation, what we're doing with Truth and Reconciliation for our genocide, and this is part of an ongoing genocide with murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Yeah. And with him providing testimony to that, I think it was really important to have the fact that this particular genocide is ongoing because there's silence. Like how the police handle it, for example, they're very much part of the problem. They don't investigate. They just say, oh, the girl like was drunk, or she went home, or she, like they don't find it. So a lot of these MMIW cases, where unless they're really high profile, they don't get investigated. And so a lot of the families, if they're wealthy enough, can afford to hire private investigators to investigate these crimes. And I feel like if we talk about, I hate it's a white guy telling the story, but on the other hand, I think it's important it's a white guy telling the story, because I think just to have him touched by the fact that he said nothing and he did nothing, and we can learn from that choice that he made, right, that he regrets to this day. And we can learn from that. And that's how we heal, is through our stories.
Thank you for that. That's amazing. And I lived with a Native American woman for about 2 years, between 2004 and 5-ish to 2006, and learned so much about the community that I didn't know just by that experience alone. The vices, the traditions, the pride, everything. So I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I'm curious, which creatives do you most admire and want to emulate? And what do they do from a technical or skill standpoint that makes their work stand apart as you look forward in your career?
I really admire, oh my God, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name right now. This very second. Guillermo del Toro. There we go. I really admire him.
Yeah, he's great.
The stories that he tells makes me feel not alone. And I think that's what's really important, like, especially The Shape of Water, like that made me feel not alone. Like I watched that in theaters like 3 times. I love just his aesthetic and how visually he is. And I like the fact his reputation is like he's apparently the sweetheart and this really nice guy, and he's very generous and kind. And I like hearing about that with my heroes, because there's too many directors I look up to, and then I find out they're jerks on set, and I'm just like, oh, you're ruining it for me, man.
Yep. Yep.
But I like the fact that he can be an artist the way he is and tell amazing stories and do it with kindness.
Yeah, my favorite movie of his is Pan's Labyrinth, and
oh yes, sure.
Yeah, and we interviewed a filmmaker in Los Angeles named Nick Lopez, who made a incredible short film. I believe it's called Teeth. Teeth, and it is lush. It looks like a Guillermo del Toro movie as well. So if you do get a chance to listen back to his or watch that film, go do it. If you love him, I think you'll be into.
Yeah, I'll go check out the film for sure.
You'll be into Nick Lopez as well. Moving ahead. I know you have a comedy horror short you're working on. I know you have a feature script you finished about mental health. Are any of those going to be animated? And how is animation? You mentioned who you love and who you want to emulate. How is animation not being used in film? Like what's missing? What could be added? So kind of a two-parter there.
Oh my God, animators love talking about this. This is what we talk about all the time. Right. Okay, what's missing in animation? Animation, the strength of animation is the fact that you're not limited by reality. You're limited by drawing. Okay, so your artistic skills is what limits you. With that being said, I find the mistake a lot of live action filmmakers use with animation is first off, they dismiss the medium completely, like, oh, it's a genre. No, it's not a genre. It's not kids. There's a lot of animation for adults. Case in point, my film is for adults, not children. So it's a medium with its own emphasis and its own priorities that's different from documentary space, which is different from the live action space. And I feel like filmmakers, the big mistake a lot of filmmakers do is they stick to their one space, but they don't peek into documentary and animation, or they don't peek into live action and documentary. And I say this to animators too. I tackle them on this as well. Like, you got to start watching live action. You can't just stick to animation, because each area, each type of story requires a certain type of storytelling. And I find that in live action, animation is not utilized well because the focus is on realism. And at that point, it's like, why are you animating it? Like, if it's real, it's just cheaper just to use a camera and photograph it. Like, why are you constructing that out of nothing? Like, that doesn't make sense. So that's why animation that's hyper real doesn't work out really well. You get this uncanny valley, like, this looks weird and creepy. Like Polar Express, for example, looks weird and creepy because they just went too realistic. It looks better when it doesn't look real. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it allows you to have an imagination as an audience. Like, so when I look at the South Park drawing, which in its first 5 or 10 years was criticized for how poorly it's animated, that's part of the novelty of it. That's part of why we believe these boys can do anything and get into any kind of trouble. Because of the way it's drawn. If it were hyper realistic, it would take us out of that place where we can just laugh at these guys being ridiculous, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the second part of the question about animation. So my short that I'm working with, NFB, is animated. It's in 2D digital animation. And I'm doing a completely different style. So I'm doing a different type of animation and all of that. And it's going to be sort of the style of Doré. If you know anything about art history, Doré is this really, really cool guy you should check out sometime. His last name is spelled D-O-R-E with an accent aigu on it. If you're French, he's a French romanticist. And so it's just mind-blowingly beautiful engraving. So it's going to be in that style. It's a love story. It's an anti-love story that takes place in hell during the apocalypse. And these poor monsters are caught up in the middle of it. Asterion and Charlotte. So Asterion is the Minotaur and Charlotte is a harpy. And it's also a sort of really loose retelling of Dante's Inferno.
I love it. I'm named after Dante's Inferno. My middle name is, I have two middle names, Adonis Dante. And so I'm Christopher Adonis Dante Barkley. And
oh, wow. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
I think my mom gave me Adonis for the God of Love, and then my dad gave me Dante, the writer. So Dante's Inferno. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. So Italian poetry, yes, medieval Italian poetry for sure, because I told you I'm obsessed with poetry. And outside of that, my mental health script, my feature, Tall Ceilings and Thin Floors, it's a hybrid. So it's live action, but it's also animation. And the animation is equal to the live action, which is going to make it really hard to find funding for. But I found a producer just recently, like a month ago. So we're hoping against hope that this like incubator I applied for like women in film and television, like gets accepted and we can move forward. But what's cool about the two forms coexisting together is it's going to really create a unique visual language that's going to be really perfect for talking about a mental health symptom that people don't talk about. It's about disassociation. And that has an aesthetic. I have mental health problems and I'm a disassociative subtype. So what it looks like, you don't experience time the same way as everybody else. And going into animation where I can play with timing in like by the frame is going to be really important for me to tell, like to show my audience how does somebody who doesn't experience time in a linear sense, how does that experience in a visual way? So that's going to be a really interesting challenge. So this movie's probably going to be like decades before it's made, but like I'm going to do everything I can to get it made.
It sounds needed. It sounds fascinating. Give us the title one more time, the tentative title.
Tall Ceilings and Thin Floors.
Tall Ceilings and Thin Floors. I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be great. I know that's what's next for you. You had so much success with Girl in the Hallway and you decided to animate it without knowing how to animate. Have you sort of changed for good? Do you feel, I guess pigeonholed is the wrong word, but do you feel like everything you make now has to include animation because that's what you're known for? Or can you go back to the Valerie that existed before you knew how to animate?
I'm not going back to the visual art world. I can't stomach it. Like the best advice I ever got. Okay. Okay. Rewind. Okay. Story time.
Love it.
In art school, we have these things called grad panels. And so this school, like you would have to do your graduation piece. And then you get a bunch of teachers that you've never worked with in the 4 years you're at that school. So they don't know you. And they evaluate your work and they decide if they're going to graduate you or not. So it doesn't matter if you passed all your classes. If you fail your grad panel, you're not graduating. Wow. So I had my grad panel and it was, I did this like really cool thing with printmaking. I was obsessed with printmaking at the time. And so it was all printmaking for me at that point. And there was nothing you can say to convince me otherwise at that point in time in my life. So they told me the best piece of advice is like, you're going to go nowhere with printmaking. It's going to go nowhere for you. No one cares about printmaking. But when you're tired of your career going nowhere, change mediums. And that's exactly what I did. I changed mediums. Best advice ever. My career was going absolutely nowhere. I couldn't get shows. No one was interested in looking at my art. So it was really depressing for me, like making art without an audience ever, like I was just making it and just putting it in my house and like showing it on like Facebook going, hey guys, this is what I made. And like, I would never get an art show ever. Like it was just so odd. And when I changed to animation, like people were interested in what I had to say and looking at my art and appreciating my work. And it's just so much more satisfying making art when you have an audience and you're not just like I didn't go to art school to to make art for myself. Like I didn't need to go to art school for that. I could have just stayed at home and did art on my own, right? Like that's what most people do for a hobby. Like it's not a hobby. I'm taking this very seriously. And to never have a public space to exhibit or have that respect or that dialogue I'm trying to have with society and my audience, and not have that. So I'm not going back to the visual art world. Like that chapter is sort of done for me. I still do art, but it's more of feeling the animation. I love animation. I love animated films. So I'm happy being where I am. I'm more worried about people thinking I'm a one-hit wonder, though, or having the expectations that I'm going to be pigeonholed with really dark and difficult, sensitive topics. And that's the thing, working on this film, that was the difficult part about it. It wasn't making a movie or no budget or like the typical things people complain about. What was, for me, it was the emotional toll of telling it. It was traumatic for me to tell this. And I realized it's not my calling to tell these kind of stories. It's too damaging to myself spiritually and emotionally. I can't do that anymore. So I'm glad that Girl in the Hallway was completed. I nearly... like I was in and out of mental hospitals. Like when I'm saying like I wasn't handling it, I wasn't handling it.
Right. Wow.
So like, and I nearly died. Like when you're hospitalized, you're like serious mental illness. Like it's life and death at that point when you're hospitalized. So like I couldn't handle this crime. Like I love true crime, and it was surprising for me thinking I can handle animating something like that. But animating something that's real, where I didn't have the comfort of saying this wasn't a true story. Like the fact this is a very true story, and Sienna is very much a real person. And, I don't know very much about her besides the nature of her death, which is really unfortunate, right? Like I'm desperate to know what her favorite Disney princess is and what she wanted to be when she grew up, and her favorite sports and her favorite food. Like I want to know who she is as a person, right? And I'll never know that. And I got a lot of people on the festival circuit wanting me to animate rape scenes and animate, suicide stuff, and like animate, missing women and like sexual exploitation and human trafficking. And like, as much as all these issues are so important, like I can't.
Right. I don't even know if they realize what they're asking you to do. Right. Like this has to come out of your mind and onto some medium. And if it exists in your mind, it's going to disturb you. That's just the way our brains work. So
yeah, like there's scenes in there where I'm bawling my eyes out as I'm drawing, like just bawling my eyes out as I'm like sitting there, like crying, going like, wow, this is like art school all over again, man. Just crying and drawing at the same time. Like it's just, so I don't want to get pigeonholed in like these really dark, depressing topics. That's not my calling.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm more worried about, is just people thinking that is what I do.
Well, there's so much to dig into on that. And I just want to thank you for sharing it. And one of the things that really stuck out there in the beginning is your willingness to take some very blunt advice. I don't think, stateside professors give such blunt advice, because we're just an overly litigious society anyway, and it's such a brand-focused society. And so students miss out on that raw honesty a lot of times. And then I think the second thing is just this idea that you could swallow your pride. There's so many creatives that would say, oh, so-and-so said I should change my medium when I'm tired of doing this because no one's going to care. Well, I'm going to prove them wrong. And you spend your whole life trying to prove one person wrong. And you just can't do that. You see a lot of people that are immature young people. They spend all their money to prove that they have money, and they go broke doing that to somebody else that doesn't have money. So it's this thing we do. And so I just commend you for having the courage and the honesty to swallow your pride and say, you know what? Fair enough. What they said is coming to fruition. I'm going to switch my medium. And you found this amazing success doing it. And I wish you nothing but just great success in the future with this. In your opinion, what are the top 3 resources for helping someone learn how to animate the way you did? So I promised this audience we'd get into sort of that value side here a little bit. If you had to pick 3 things to start with to help someone learn how to animate from scratch, what would those 3 things be?
Thing 1, draw every day, draw all the time. This is the only way you're going to get good, is draw. So life drawing. So it could be something as simple as table of chairs or like a still life, or you can go and then do that like 15-minute drawing a day. And then in a sketchbook, you'll actually literally watch your improvement as it happens. Which is really exciting for you. If you stick it for a month, you'll see an improvement. You will, and guaranteed. And it's going to be so cool. Like when you go through that sketchbook. Croquis Cafe, I will email you guys with that resource. That's a free online life drawing. So you can physically distance with that and work on nude life drawing. Mm-hmm. That's going to be really important. So that'll be step 1. You're only as good as how you draw in animation. So step 1, learn how to draw. Mm-hmm. Step 2, I would say to be a really good animator.
Or just what are those resources like? So number 2 could be that program you just mentioned. Can you spell that program, by the way?
Croquis Cafe? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Croquis Cafe is a Vimeo channel.
Okay, got it.
And it's CROQUIS Cafe. And it's art models.
Got it. Perfect.
Yeah, so you can do that for drawing. The second one would be the book, animation. Animation Survival. Here it is. All right. So the next one is a classic. Everyone has this. It's a mandatory reading. It's worth $100 on Amazon. Okay. But it's called the Animation Survival Kit. It's a white book. It's by Richard Williams. It's a classic. It's a mandatory reading for every animation school ever. If you go through that book line by line, and you will be able to animate after going through that book. Got
it. So resources, Croquis Cafe, Animation Survival Kit, and draw every day, right?
Yeah. And the third one, okay, because the Croquis Cafe was the draw every day one.
Got it.
The third one I would say is attend film festivals. Mm-hmm. Attend them, like go to them. Oh my God, they're like film school. Just go. Become friends. Like I had so many, I didn't get a lot of help from, I got a lot of help from industry people, not in the sense I got like a budget and I got all this, this flashy stuff, but I straight up got one-on-one with studio execs telling me exactly what I need to do to make a film and hit it out of the park, and listen to their advice, honestly. If they don't have time to mentor you, maybe they have time to give you 10 minutes of advice.
Right.
Right. So do that. Go find your community. Go on Instagram. Oh my God, Instagram is where all the animators are. And then you can go through the film festivals and then, go, okay, I like that animation. So I'm going to go find them on Instagram, because you guarantee you will find them on Instagram. And they're like me, DM me. I'm excited when people DM me. I'm like, oh, hey, a fan letter. They're like that too. No one cares about independent animation. So yeah, we're friendly, enthusiastic bunch that would be more than happy to give you advice. And Facebook has so many animation groups, honestly, just like 2D animation or stop motion or whatever you want to do, visual VFX. There's whole groups on there where people post articles, how-to stuff, advice, critique, whatever you need. Writers groups, it doesn't matter. Go find it. It's all on social media.
Yeah, I love that. And it's basically a way to find your tribe and get around those people. Some of the best advice, by the way, I heard early on, festival advice sort of how to grow in a festival, is when you talk to an executive, you could walk up to them and say, hey, I know you don't have time right now. I know you're busy right now, but would you have time to get a beer with me at 6:00? And the answer is probably going to be yes. Beer on me, dinner on me, 6:00. Here's the place. Do you have time for that? And after the festival's over, that's what they're looking to do. So, there is a lot of wisdom in what you said there, Val, and
follow up too. Oh my God. When you have a relationship, there's this one guy, I follow up with him once a year, every year before festival. I would email him and go, hey, what's up? Here's an update. it's like follow up. Like no one follows up either. So like keep those relationships that you form, right?
Right. Absolutely. And the worst thing is and the saddest thing is when you know someone has an ambition and you say, hey, how are you doing on that? And they say, oh, I'm doing pretty good. Oh, have you joined any groups on Facebook? Who's your community? Oh, I haven't done any of that. So it's like, well, are you really trying? So that's too bad. But if you really want to do it, I think that you gave some sage advice there to this audience. So thank you for that. And Valerie, I wish you the best of luck in everything that you're doing. I think you're incredible. I can't wait to see what you produce next. Can you tell everybody where they can find you on social media and on the internet, and maybe even where they can see some of your work?
Yeah, no problem. So my website is girlinthehallwaymovie.com. Really easy. My Instagram is @girlinthehallwaymovie. That's easy. And that's it. So you'll find my contact information on my website, and you'll be able to contact me through Instagram. No problem.
Absolutely. I think your website is so well built. It is so beautiful. It really, I really enjoy just perusing it and being surprised by all the elements in it. So kudos to you on that. And if you developed it yourself, and kudos to your guidance if you had someone develop it for you.
Wix.com.
Okay. That's what we use too. That's what we use too. You can get as creative as you want to. Wix is the perfect canvas. So
Wix.com. Yeah. And it's funny. I had this, I'm also a fan of Moo for business cards, and I get so many compliments on my business cards. Like people think I spend so much money on them, but it's just Moo.com. It's another one. I'm very happy customer. I'm not getting paid to recommend them at all. Like I'm just a happy customer. Moo.com. Plus they send you cards with compliments about your hair when you open up your box. You're like, your hair looks great. You're like, yes, this film festival, I'm going to do hot girl shit. It's great.
I love it. This episode brought to you by MooBusinessCards.com. It's wonderful. This is awesome. We'll end it on this. Are all your pets named after Lord of the Ring characters, or only your cat Gandalf?
Only my cat Gandalf.
Oh.
Because she's gray. So when she was born, she was like this gray kitten. So like the gray one, Gandalf the Gray. I mean, that's how she came to her name.
You have 2 dogs and 2 cats, and they get along just fine, right?
Yes. And they're all rescues, every last one of them. And they're like peas in a pod.
That doesn't surprise me one bit. That aligns perfectly with who you've told us you are today. Valerie, this has been such a pleasure. I've enjoyed it so much. Best of luck in everything that you do. Please don't be a stranger. And thank you again for the conversation.
Oh, thanks for reaching out, man. Like, this is great. I'm really flattered. Thanks.
Anytime. Stay in touch. And hopefully when the virus is over, you can make your way down here. I can make my way up there, and we can have a croissant and a coffee together.
Yes. Love croissants.
Go croissants. Me too. Talk soon, Val.
All right. Bye.
Bye. You've been listening to the Make It podcast. To find more information about this week's topics, including links to relevant blog posts, projects, and indie creatives, please visit our website at www.bonsai.film. If you haven't already, you can join our podcast community on Apple Podcasts or the podcast app of your choice by searching for Make It Bonsai Creative, and the show will pop right up. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at _Bonsai Creative, and Facebook by searching for Bonsai Creative. And of course, if you're looking to take a big step towards your filmmaking success, go to www.bonsai.film and click on Book Us to schedule a free discovery meeting and needs assessment. You have everything to gain. Until next time, be better, be creative, be engaged, and thank you for listening.